Hey everyone, this is Stuart, Victor Echo 9, Charlie Foxtrot, and welcome back to our Ham Radio Insights part of my YouTube channel here. On this playlist, podcast, whatever you want to call it, we bring in people from around the ham radio community that are making an impact in the lives of others and doing some pretty cool stuff. And today I stumbled upon Gregg Marco. I know Gregg is joining us from just north of Atlanta, and Gregg has an extensive resume, CV, what you want to call it, for expeditions, DX-peditions. Whiskey 6 Italy Zulu Tango joins us from Georgia. Hey, Gregg, welcome to the show. Now, I got to ask, Whiskey 6, are you originally from California?
I am, yes. So,
you're one of the guys that got out of there.
Yeah, San Francisco, but I've been in Georgia for 35 years. So almost half my life has been here. So California was in my early life. I moved here when I was 36 years old, I think, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah, I like the San Francisco area. I've been there many a times in my career over the years. But hey, tell me about your beginnings in ham radio. I mean, we all got stories to tell. How did you get involved with ham radio? And obviously, you've been doing it for a while. What keeps your interest in it?
Well, I got my ticket in 1968. It's a long time ago, man. I still had hair then. And then I think I was 14 years old and was active a little bit with some friends. And then I got interested in girls, and ham radio kind of took a back seat, and I've got some friends in ham radio. I say we've been friends since BG, before girls. So, I messed around, as a typical teenage boy, and got out of high school and went right into the Air Force and did my stint in the Air Force. Got pretty lucky. I got great duty. I was an avionics technician on the SR-71, which, if you're familiar with airplanes, it's kind of like the hot rod of airplanes. So that was fun. Actually, probably the only ham that's made contacts from the cockpit of an SR-71. I used to get on HF and talk to my friends when I was out, working at night, and that was a kick. So I got active in ham radio a little bit back when I was in the Air Force, and got out of the Air Force and made wine at a winery in Sonoma for a while, and I decided it was time to get serious. I was in my early 20s, and I went to work for a defense contractor that made the equipment I worked on, and about that point in time, I got back into radio. Mostly was doing stuff with repeaters. This was in the 70s, and repeaters were the big thing. And in the mid 80s, I got bit by the DX bug, and I started out on the DX nets back then were plentiful. You could get on and find a net, and that was kind of interesting for a while. And then my CW was really terrible at the time, and I got on and I made a CW contact with FR5 AI on Reunion Island. Was my first CW DX contact, and I was hooked. And so in the early 80s, I had a station out in California, moved to Atlanta in 1991, got really serious about radio, put up tall tower and a big quad, and got involved in the local ham radio DXing scene, and that was all well and good and having a great time. And in about 2005, I met Bob Alphen, K4 UEE, and Bob was a very accomplished DX-peditioner, and he passed away just a little over 2 years ago. And he asked me if I wanted to go on a contest trip to Costa Rica. So went on the trip, a bunch of us from the Southeast DX Club, and it was a Friday morning before CQ Worldwide CW was to start, and I sat down at the radios, and both of our radios were dead. A storm had passed through the night before. We'd left the radios hooked up. Static or a power electrical surge or something took out the pin diodes in the radio. They wouldn't transmit. So finding pin diodes in San Jose, Costa Rica just wasn't going to happen. So I got on the phone with Elecraft, Skype back then, right? So we got on a Skype call and, fixed the radios and got it back on the air. And Bob says to me, "You can fix stuff pretty good, can't you?" I said, "I can fix about anything." That's what my kids tell me. And so he said, "Well, got a use for a guy with your skills." And it was about 2 years passed by. I was on my way to the airport. I was like you, I worked in high tech, and I was a road warrior. And I got a call on the way to the airport. He says, "This is the call you've been waiting for. Do you want to go on a DX-pedition?" I said, "Yeah, where?" He said, "Navassa." So Navassa was in the top 10 at the time, and went on that trip where I met Glenn, W0GJ, and a bunch of other guys. And that was the beginning of things. And I've been doing DX-peditioning and DXing and contest trips ever since then. And
so I won't tell you, I actually will tell you, you've been a ham longer than I've been alive.
You had to bring that up now, didn't you?
Well,
hey, Stuart, what's your point?
58 years you've been in the ham. So you got a wealth of experience. You've seen a lot of things over the years.
Oh, a lot of the stuff on a DX-pedition stays on the DX-pedition, but yeah, a lot of memories. And And both my daughters are hams, and my granddaughter is a new hams. One of our granddaughters. So we're keeping the torch going, and that makes 4 generations in our family that have been hams. My dad.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And one of the things that I've never been on a DX-pedition myself. I always say when I meet a guy like you, hey, if you know anybody who's looking, I'll give you my phone number, right? Give me a call. I'll drop everything and go now that I'm not working any longer, I can just easily do that. But, one of the things that I always talk about with experienced DX-peditioners and those that want to get on to first time is, how do you get your break? You got yours because you went to Costa Rica to do CQ Worldwide CW, had an unfortunate radio issue where you got to shine as, repairing radios. And then you got that call, right? I could only imagine if you just couldn't go to Navassa, would you get a second call, right?
So that's a good question. It's one of those opportunities that if you're a ham and you get that call, you need to take it, because it was a turning point in the hobby for me, and I've had a lot of turning points in this hobby, all good. Most of them I relate back to changes in employment, people I met who influenced my professional career. So yeah, you got to take that call, because Navassa led to Malpelo. Desecheo was the first. Desecheo led to Malpelo. Malpelo led to Navassa. I had an opportunity to go to Amsterdam Island in between there that I couldn't make that trip, but I helped, being away from the island as much as I could. Where else did we go? Beauvais. I've been to Svalbard, Ghana, Saba. Yeah, it's a long list and lots of good memories.
Yeah, and I read on your QRZ that Beauvais was that you had to go there twice, because one of them said it was canceled, or you guys had to abort the mission to go there.
What happened? Because the other coupling between the engine and the drivetrain was a kind of big rubber couple, a huge thing. Well, apparently there was a misalignment, and it got real hot, and the boat filled up with smoke. I didn't see any flames, but where there's smoke, there's fire. That happened while we were anchored at Beauvais. We were waiting for a weather window to go to the island, and the captain said, "We're going home." Captain's call.
Yeah,
right?
that unfortunately happens from time to time. That that's not a very easy trip to get to. Talking to Ken, who recently did the most recent 3Y0K. There was a lot of logistics and a lot of planning just to get there, and then getting onto the island. And then once you're on, he said, once you get on the island, do the hamming. That's the easy part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's and this is a point that Glenn Johnson likes to share a lot. 95% of the work is done before you set foot on the airplane, and I kind of put that to the test. I added up, estimated all the hours I put into planning Saba. Yep, worked out to be about 96%, and so the math is proved out. It's a ton of work, and it's really rewarding. Usually get home, I'm exhausted, and got home from Saba, had a great trip, but I took a month or two away from thinking about where to go next, and it's amazing. It's an amazing part of the hobby to be in.
I mean, I can relate. I've never done anything remotely to the same level that you guys on, even Saba, which I've been to Phillipsburg, and I've seen Saba from the shores of St. Martin, just thinking one day, I want to go out there. There's this big mountain in the middle of the ocean. I want to go out there one day. And so I want to talk about that in a second. But, a lot of my audience is parks on the air folks. Right? They do a lot of parks on the air. And some of them are more serious than others. I would kind of lean more on the more serious side. And I can relate. 95% of my planning a parks on the air trip is just the logistics of where am I going to go? How am I going to get there? Where am I staying? I'm planning a trip this summer. I was going to go earlier in the year, but my son, he's not a youngster anymore. He's almost 30. Calls me up and says, "Hey, Dad, I'm getting married this summer." And I went, "You're in Alberta." He says, "That's across the country." He says, "I was going to go to Newfoundland this summer. You just totally screwed up that trip for me, right?" So I said, my next thing I thought, okay, I'll go to the Madeline Islands. I don't know if you know where the Madeline Islands are, but they're about a 5-hour ferry ride north of Prince Edward Island, right in the middle of the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So you know where St. Paul Island is, where the CY0 team went to last year. It's basically at the same latitude as that, just more into the Gulf. And so it's easy to get to. It's very much domesticated. There's highways and there's campgrounds and there's everything. But just planning that, for me, that's still a lot of work. And I can only imagine the scale of planning for something like Saba. So with Saba, you guys took a bunch of youth there. Tell me a little about that. How did that come together?
So Saba was the second trip in a project that started back 2024. Going back even further, I've known George Wallner, AA7JV, since we went to Navassa together. I met him about 2015. And I was planning a trip to Chesterfield, and George had been to Chesterfield before. We hadn't been in touch for a while, so I reached out to him, and he started talking to me about this project he was working on called a RIB, Radio in a Box, or Rig in a Box. And I ended up participating with him in that project for a number of years, and we'd make a bunch of trips out to the Bahamas and test it and do contesting and all. And most people in the DX world are very familiar with George and his work. He took his boat out to the Pacific, and I got a call from him one day. He says, what about Ducey? He hoped to, he was near French Polynesia. And I said, and I got many friends on Pitcairn, which is the governmental kind of authority over Ducey. I said, well, let me make some phone calls. And so I talked with the people I knew and put me in contact with some other folks who were in the approval process, and took about 3-4 days to get a license. And I said, George, we're ready to go. And so flew out to Papeete, Tahiti, took a plane to Mangareva and met George in Mangareva. And then we took the boat to Ducey. And on the way there, I said, this concept of the RIB is great, but I think we can make one that's a little smaller and maybe serve a bit of a different application. And he said, yeah, let's do it. And so I went off and did it. And so we built these, what we call Next Gen RIB 2. And it's now a project that's funded by the Northern California DX Foundation. And it's a small RIB, but it fits in the overhead compartment on a plane. And it's the use it's found is to complement local operations on a DX-pedition by bringing people in to operate remotely. And so we had a technology, and we needed an application for it. So it was my wife said, well, why don't you use it to get kids involved? And I said, well, that's a great idea. We've got this project that's put together, and sort of the life cycle of the project is we bring in kids that operate remotely on a DX-pedition. From the team of remote operators, we get some volunteers, and they get to participate on the next trip as part of the on-island. So 4 of the operators on Saba were remote operators from our previous trip to Rotuma the year before. And now there's a trip coming this year, and it's going to be a new group of kids, but they're going to run the whole thing. The only adult that's going to go there is going to be a doctor. And I'm really adamant about when you send people someplace like that, you need to have medical expertise on the team. I've been in both ways, and it's much better when you have a doctor, some medical expertise you can lean on when you're on an island in the middle of the Pacific. So we've got a trip going this year. It's going to be probably 8 operators locally on the island, and probably about 30 operators operating remotely. In 2027, we've got thoughts of 2 trips. One is going to be an all-YL DX, and I've got a leader for that. We were going to do it this year, but she had some things come up and couldn't make it. So next year, we're doing a trip. And then a friend of mine who was one of the team members on the Rotuma trip, he wants to do something in Africa late next. So it looks like we're going to have 1 trip this year and then 2 trips next year. And what's nice about this, Stuart, is I've got other people who are stepping up in leadership roles, because this is how you scale, right? I can't do it all myself. I'm 71 years old. I'm not getting any younger, and there's no shortage of youth. The number of young people involved in the ham community today is amazing. It's just we don't really see them a lot. So I do this in partnership with Yoda, and that's turned out to be very beneficial. We've got a nonprofit that we operate under, because in the States you got to do that, or else the IRS wants a chunk of your change. So it's a process now, a project. It's got a life cycle, and it has momentum. So we're just going to keep pressing on and looking for new opportunities to expand our horizons.
And what are the logistics like with traveling with youth? I mean, are we talking teenagers years, or somebody in their 20s, or kind of mixture of all that? Because I imagine traveling with people in their 20s is a lot different than traveling with, say, teenagers that are just getting into the hobby.
If for a teenager to participate in our endeavors, if you're not an adult, you have to have a guardian. So in this case, we had a 16-year-old on this trip, Robin N7 Ewan N7 EWN, and his father, Robin W7YED, came on the trip. And the rest of the young operators, there were 2 more from the U.S., there were 2 from Romania, 2 from the Netherlands, and 1 from Germany. And then a couple of experienced mentors were on the trip as well. Because we've got people flying in from different places on different flights. And so I had this spreadsheet just with all the flight information. It was massive. And everything was going along pretty well, And then it was Friday morning, September 1st. It was the day before the Labor Day weekend here in the States. And we were going to take a ferry from Phillipsburg to St. Martin because we had too much stuff to put on the plane. So I'm sitting here, sitting right where I'm sitting now, looking at the same computer screen. And I look at my email. It says from a ferry company. Go, this is interesting. Oh no, service suspended. This is a month before we're supposed to leave. And the ferry is the last leg in the trip. Everything funneled into that ferry trip, and they canceled the trip. So we ended up chartering a plane to go to Saba, which wasn't much more money, but at that point in the planning process, it's the last thing you want to do because it just kind of threw everything up in the air. And but it all came together. Saba is an amazing place. You need to go there. It's not the first time I've been there. My first trip there was in 2010. Fortunately, with social media and all, I've kept relationships with people I've gotten to know there, and so it was real nice going back.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I looked at it from Phillipsburg and went, I want to go there one day. I think you can see it from Margot as well. If my memory serves me correct, I think you can see it from Margot as well. I can't remember 100%. Yeah, but I've done boat rides over to Anguilla and to St. Bartholomew. Just never made it to Saba. But I heard Glenn tells me you can actually fly in there commercially now. Yeah,
it's the world's shortest commercial runway. It's only slightly longer than an aircraft carrier, and you got the roar of the engines, and you're descending in. The last thing you hear is the stall alarm because they basically stall the plane onto the runway and heavy on the binders. The opposite end of the runway is a cliff to the ocean, so there's really no options if you miss your mark.
Yeah, you don't want to overrun that runway. So tell me about the experience of going out there. What can you share with me? Because I know the rule. What happens on a DX-pedition stays on the island. But I'm sure there's a lot of takeaways that you can share, experiences that that the youth had while on the island, and even moments that you said, "Wow, okay, I wasn't expecting that."
So our approach is, we don't go to somewhere that has an existing station because we don't think that that provides as broad of an experience. So we ship some stuff down by freight, and we brought a lot of stuff by carrying or by baggage. So they built the stations from the ground up. We had two locations. The ribs were at one spot, and the on-island team was at another location. The two locations were connected by a VPN, so the logging computers all knew where the other stations were. But the way these things work out is it almost becomes like two separate operations. The local team is hands off with the remote team. The remote team manages themselves. They've got people to take care of scheduling. We didn't have any equipment problems, so we didn't have to tend to that. I think everybody had a good time. What was fun for me is, when a problem comes up, if they can solve it, I just step back and say, well, go fix it. And so we had a number of situations come up where we had to do antenna repairs, had to make decisions. They set up the operating schedule on their own. It was Vincent, PC2Y, who's in his late 20s. He just took the bull by the horn, and he came up with a very creative operating schedule that's way above where I was thinking about going. And it was complicated because the team was staying about half an hour away from the operating site. And we rented a van. Of course, we got there, the van was broken down. So we had to rent cars, and it was a bit of a challenge shuttling people back and forth. But Vincent put together a schedule that took all that into an account, and it really went kind of smoothly. I think they were amazed by the quality of the propagation. Multiple bands were open, around the world 24 hours a day. We had great conditions. We operated in CQ Worldwide sideband, which is something we try and do on these trips, is overlay the trip onto a major contest, because that just is another experience, another memory. We ended up finishing, we were multi-2 high power. We only had 500 watt amps, but I think we finished 13th in the world and 6th in North America, ahead of a number of North American very competitive contest stations. So we were right in there in the mix. We had better propagation. So it was fun. Everybody had a smile on their face when we left. We keep in contact, and they're all looking forward to doing it again. In fact, I know at least 3 of the team members are collaborating right now on doing some kind of trip on their own in Europe. So I'm real pleased that that's taking place. As far as surprises, I don't think there really were many surprises. This team just kind of rose to the occasion. If something caught them by surprise, they just put their heads down and solved the problem. And I really didn't see it. So
I'm just looking at my QRZ log here, and I see that I worked PJ6Y 5 times from the 19th of October 2025 to the 26th of October. So I'm sure a couple of that late in the contest time there, for sure. You talk about remote, and there's a lot of discussion in my little group of DXers about remote stations. The most recent one was Kilo Papa 5 that was remote, and I understand the logistics. Beside of it, because it's a kind of a protected area, and they don't want a lot of people going there. And upsetting the natural or that one. I think there was some environmental reasons why they couldn't go there and operate from there full time. But there's some debate back and forth about, does a remote station count as an expedition where you're not physically there, only the radios are there? And a lot of people are torn one way or another around, hey, does it work? Does it count or does it not count?
So let me approach that from a little different tangent. If the licensing authority approves it, in my mind, in most people's mind, and the people who say it's good for DXCC credit, it's all good. One thing about this hobby is, we've seen a lot of technological advancement in our times as a ham, and it's continuing at a rapid pace. And I don't know of a case where you were able to slow down technology in ham radio. And this is just another technology. The Beauvais expedition, a budget of $1.7 million. DXpeditions are getting really expensive. And as a community that funds DXpeditions, we're not keeping up. The ability for collectively all the clubs and the individuals in the world who contribute to the success of these operations financially, it's just not there anymore. It's not keeping up with the rate of inflation, the costs. They're planning a trip to Peter 1. That's going to be north of $2 million. And it's going to be interesting how the fundraising plays out in this. So leveraging remote technology, you can take a lot of costs out of the expedition if you take a smaller team and you stay longer. For instance, the cost of a boat to say take 13 team members is about $350,000 to $400,000 for a 2-week trip. You can do a dive boat and take 6 people for twice as long for half the price. And so there's an economic piece here that's going to come into play. And like anything, the technology is ahead of adoption. And over the next few years, you're going to see this adopted as a matter of need. We'll just see how it plays out. I'm a technologist. I have been on my entire life, and I enjoy doing this sort of thing. And, it's like anything, there's always people that poo-poo a new technology. I mean, when FT8 came on the scene, and then, there was people that didn't adopt that. But FT8 has turned out to be great for the hobby because it's brought a huge number of people in. I remember we were on our way to Beauvais, and my first exposure to FT8 was like, and that's not my thing. But I came around to realize that for ham radio, it's a great thing. So what if we could take half the cost out of DXpedition? You could do twice as many DXpeditions. Is that a bad thing? Absolutely not.
No, I agree. I know firsthand, because I did a couple years ago, coming up on 2 years, I did a trip to Grindstone Island, which is a small little island in the middle of the Bay of Fundy. Nothing extravagant, but we had to get permission from the Nature Trust of New Brunswick to go there. They helped us arrange the transportation, which we had to get 2 Zodiacs to take us out there. And just for us to go there for the day, $1,200 Canadian. Well, that money had to come somewhere. Now, the operating cost was minor because we all were local. I was going to go to Sable Island last year, just for one day for me to go alone, $3,500. So it's not cheap. These things are not cheap. I can only imagine when you scale it to the size that you guys are doing. It's I'm just taking a 30 amp hour battery in a backpack with an FT891 radio and a portable antenna, and it's still $3,500 for me to go. Needless to say, I didn't go to Sable last year. I just couldn't justify the cost, and I hit all my clients for my work days up for the Grindstone. They help cover the cost for that, giving them sponsorship opportunities to help sponsor that. But it's good, and I agree with you. Technology and ham radio. Greg, it's still to the point today. When I got back into ham radio 3 years ago, after taking a few years off to raise my family and run my businesses, I came back in and I said, wow, what is this FT8 thing? I never heard of that. What's this Parks on the Air stuff? I never heard of that, right? So I don't even know how long FT8's been around for. I would imagine 10 years or so now. And there's still guys out there with the no FT8 signs on their QRZ page, right? So obviously the adoption of new technology in ham radio meets some significant roadblocks. Look at SSB compared to AM right back in the day, right? There was a lot of people that were anti-SSB. I think advancements in technology need to happen in this hobby to keep the younger folks from coming into it and keep them engaged. They're not going to sit there like us old guys and talk about the weather and our busted hips on a rag shoe. You know what I mean? So
what's the future look like? AI is going to play a big part of ham radio moving forward. I could see 10 years from now, remote ham radio is going to grow exponentially. Not necessarily the entity remote ham radio, but ham radio remote technology is going to grow exponentially. And it's going to become more like almost like a telephone exchange. You get on a website and you click, whatever radio you want to use. And the cool thing about this is it moves the hobby into the wheelhouse of the young people, because it's not him. It's a lot of these people like to write code. We got AI out there. I think it's a good place for the hobby to go. And you layer on the fact that a lot of these young people don't live in a place where they can build a station. It's pretty clear to me that more and more remote operation, both daily operation and DX-peditions, is going to be part of the future. You can get on board or you can step aside, whatever you want to do. I'm on board.
I'm with you. I like the idea. You see it now, right? You want to launch a station in Haiti. There's one available that you can go and sign up for and use and pay for airtime. So it's only coming. I'm sure it'll get broader and broader as the time goes on. Hey, Gregg, thanks for coming on the show today. I really appreciate your insight and sharing a little bit of your background and a little bit of your experiences with Saba and a few other expeditions you've been on. In closing, what is the best expedition you've been on and why?
That's a tough question. The best expedition I've been on would probably be somebody else would say is not their favorite. I think probably Malpelo. It was the first expedition where I had a leadership role. We made 195,000 QSOs, which was a high bar at that point in time. Before FT8, you can make 100,000 Qs with FT8 alone these days. So I'd have to say it was probably Malpelo. The most disappointing experience was Beauvais. Having to go home. We were at sea for 14 days to get there from Punta Arenas, Argentina. It took us another week or so to lift back to Cape Town. We could only make 4 knots. And so we're going from Beauvais to Cape Town at 4 knots. I could walk faster than the boat. And so that was a huge disappointment. I hope that others don't have to experience that. Let's just leave it at that.
So if I'm a youth, and gosh, I would go back to being 20 years old again tomorrow if I could. I always tell I said to my wife, you obviously you grew up as a child of the 70s. I was a child of the 80s. The 80s was the best decade to grow up because all we had is partying and fun. It was great. None of the worries that the youth have today. But if you were a youth, or there's youth out there who are interested in doing this and getting involved with what you're doing, what's the best way for them to reach out to someone like you or get started? How do they get going in this?
Reach out to someone like me. Get involved in contesting, because there's a good overlap between DXing and contesting. And contesting is a great way to hone your skills. You don't want to reach out to somebody who's planning a DX expedition and not have good operating skills. It's also helpful. It's a characteristic or a trait we refer to as a +1. You're a good operator, but you also have something else you bring to the table, whether it's organizational skills, logistics skills, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, and you can help out on the legal side of things. It's always good to have something else, or at least be able to position your request or your argument on why you should go on a team with another skill set that complements operating, because there's no shortage of opportunity for people to contribute on a DXpedition team, and it's really helpful if you've got some complementary skills.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because you're the first one of all the guys I interviewed to talk about the +1, having some other complementary skill set. I can see that being super, super important, especially, going to somewhere like Beauvais where medical help is days and days, if not weeks away, or, you're your attorney and you have to, navigate certain legal things, or an accountant getting the books all organized for an expedition. So I think that's a very, very important skill to have, just not being a good operation and being a good ham radio operator across multiple modes is, essential, but also having that ability. For me, hey, I'm an IT tech. I can network the computers together, right? But
so that's a huge skill now. It used to be paper logs, and then getting into the 21st century, we started using contesting software, and that's evolved. Now we have Starlink. I mean, you can make a phone call from Bangladesh. I was talking to one of the guys there, and we're sending text back, and we're talking. It's changed things a bit. The world's gotten smaller with connectivity like that. But we used to have a satellite phone, and you got one phone call a day for about 10 minutes, and that was it. IT expertise is a needed skill set on a DX-pedition. We're getting better at that, but Windows PCs can be finicky, and it never hurts to have that kind of skill. Knowing how to diagnose antenna issues, interstation interference problems. Those are a lot of skills you can develop by being part of contesting teams. There's a young man I met who was on the Malpelo trip. I don't know what his US call is, but Manu, LU9LSD or S, whatever, something like that. It's not LSD.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
And I met Manu. He was probably 20 years old, and now he's one of the premier contesters in the world. He's somewhere all the time, and he got hooked up with Crassy, and that's turned into a career for him. He works for one of Crassy's companies, and so it's just that kind of thing. It's awesome.
Yeah. So if you're interested in doing this, like Gregg mentioned, get involved with contesting. Contesting is great for high pressure pileups and stuff like that. Worldwide Award was a big eye opener for me doing that this year with the VE9 WWA team. Even just something as simple as going out and doing parks on the air activations, other than just sitting in your car with a hamstick. Getting out to somewhere remote and going out there just teaches you what to do in the middle of nowhere with a radio and antenna. It helps. It's all good training ground, Gregg. Hey, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate taking some time out of your evening or late afternoon to come and talk to us today. I wish you all the luck in your future expeditions. And again, if you need someone, I'm only a phone call away.
Okay. Yeah. All right, Stuart. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to crossing paths with you again.
Absolutely. So thanks for tuning in to our show today with Gregg, W6IZT or IZT as they stay down in the US. Gregg, great to have you on today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and follow us on YouTube for future episodes. We got a lot of great stuff coming on, even on the DX-pedition world. We actually have an interview in the next coming days with the team from the Dry Tortugas Parks on the Air expedition that happened earlier this year and actually the year before too. So watch for that. We got all kinds of great stuff happening. I'm Stuart, Victor Echo 9, Charlie Foxtrot. We'll see you guys in a future episode.